Okay, hello, I'm Luke Green. Maybe you've seen some of my other vlogs. I just did one on Lord of the Rings. This one's going to be based off of a movie I was working on for a film festival um, that happens out overseas, away out of the country. I'm not going to say where. Anybody who knows me knows which countries translators I work with. But I'm not going to say where over on YouTube. Anyway, and which specific translators I work with. I don't. This particular documentary that I was working on, what I'm doing is typing out all the scripts so that the translators have an easier time doing the translation, and also explaining the expressions and idioms and such. Um, and this particular documentary was about how Hollywood is marginalizing and objectifying women from a particular ethnic group. Um, to tell you the truth, I agree. The only problem I have with the thing is that, in my opinion, Hollywood does that with everybody. It doesn't matter your ethnicity. Most of what Hollywood, not most of, the very simple action movies, adventure movies, fantasies, the kind of stuff that the Oscar looks down its nose at, that is pretty tolerable. There is usually very little political intent there, except there's really just a let's throw up bombs and other things to make people go ooh and ah, and fine. That the romantic comedies, again, mostly fine. Occasionally there's one that gets a little bit overly political for my taste. But overall, romantic comedies and action movies I like. If you start getting into the over-the-top dramas, the based on a real movie, the inspired by true events, the inspirational tales, then all I ever see is hypocrisy. I can't go to any of those. I rarely do. Every time I have, with rare exceptions, anytime I've gone to something that's supposed to be a monumental, moving piece, I've just found it rife with hypocrisy and just felt disappointed. So I don't watch those very much anymore. Hollywood, a lot of the Hollywood stuff, like Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, a couple other things, but a lot of those kind of characters and the shows that are really popular that they put out are just offensive to me. And I know people are going to say that I'm just have a low tolerance for it, and that Adam Sandler's really very funny, and I'm just being I don't know, an old fuddy-duddy, a stick in the mud. I don't find the toilet humor amusing. I don't find Vince Vaughn's another one sometimes. He's okay in some things, but in other things it's just really annoying. I don't find skirt chasing appealing. I don't... no, that is not a statement of sexual orientation. Thank you very much. I don't find the guy that takes pride in having slept with many different women to be something that I would like to see encouraged. I find it offensive. I don't like the fact that society expects men to be sexual, overly sexual, I should say. That if we are just mild, if there are other things on our minds besides sex at any given point in time, that there's something wrong with us. And that's why, you see a lot of cases where people are you get people defined, but when you have an unusual sexuality, people are defined by their sexuality. At least when you're male, you can have some characters that are female who are lesbian, and they'll casually mention that they're lesbian in the course of it, of a story and then you forget about it because, well, women are rarely defined by their sexuality, are not as often. I should say they are still very defined by their sexuality, especially if they're, because they're often used as, that's often how they're objectified in Hollywood, and Hollywood will objectify pretty much anything. But men there is a trope you find on tvtropes.org. It basically runs all men are perverts. And if you look at the way Hollywood runs, that's the way they think. That if I'm operating on a normal, natural level, that I'm supposed to be thinking about sex all the time. That if I'm not thinking about sex all the time, if something else is more important, then there's something wrong with my sexual appetite. I find it offensive that that Hollywood seems to expect me to run around to ask out as many women as possible. I find it offensive that toilet humor is expected to be acceptable for men. Well, it's not acceptable for women. That it's not maybe something that's good, but it's something that you expect to happen. It's something that apparently all men, even all real men should be able to appreciate crass toilet humor. Only the really stuffed shirts that are dead inside or care more about money or whatever are the kinds that would think that that kind of humor is unacceptable. That end is like I don't like the other end of the spectrum being the hoity-toity, haughty person that has grown up with money and expects everything to happen for them and stuff like that. It's, every once in a while you get a guy, you get the actor, the main character, where they're just the average person, but it's usually you get some toilet humor in there, and it's usually considered something that's acceptable. I'm not talking about everybody. Everybody I've ever known has occasionally done some sort of little remark to somebody when they're among family and friends. I'm talking about on the TV show is the kind of people that do it in broad day, among everybody. And this is considered normal for men. I'm supposed to be good at sports. Or I'm supposed to be interested in sports at least. If I'm not interested in sports, that means I am unsocial. The fact that, for example, I could care less about the Super Bowl. I think it was last week. Whatever. The fact that I could care less about the Super Bowl, and trust me, I will forget within a month who won. It already took me a little bit to try to remember who was actually playing, much less who won. And about the only reason why I clearly remembered who won is because I read a piece just recently about how the Packers were a socialist organization or whatever, and that they had just won again, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, much of what Hollywood puts out for its male figures I find offensive. And a lot of the ones that I don't mind, that I approve, that I shouldn't say approve of, that I enjoy, are the ones that are considered to just be, fantasies, escapism, and just out there for someone to have a good time for a couple hours, that according to the art type doesn't really mean anything. And while we're on the subject, objectification. If you don't have a real life, personal, one-on-one interaction with with an entity, you objectify them. 100%. Obama's objectified all the time as the guy who spends too much money, or the guy ruining the country, or yada 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 yada. That's objectification. Bush was objectified. Washington's objectified. Lincoln is objectified. Jefferson. Adolf Hitler is objectified. Any person you've never actually met that you don't have that complex interaction with will get objectified. Now, there are some people who will connect with a particular character on a personal level. That particular character is no longer objectified because now it is, for that person, because it is tied in. Where's the camera? There it is. It is tied in with things that have occurred in that particular viewer's real life. That is the connection you're going for as an artist. But in reality, there's still, the character itself is still just a reminder of these other things that the person has a real life experience with. The character itself will never be as complex as a real person. As much as I enjoy building my characters, and the way I feel they have their own personality at some point, I know they're not real people. If I go to some alternate universe where I actually get to meet my characters, that would be lovely. But I can guarantee you, if such a thing happened, they would act in ways that I would never predict. Everything in a story, everything in a piece of art, everything in a movie, everything is produced. It is created. It is directed towards a specific flavor. Everything in there, the people in it are people. Once it goes up on screen or on the page, they are objects. Because that's the only way our brain will understand them. So objectification happens with every character. The objection against objectification really basically says, I don't like the direction that you're heading here. I don't like the way this character is objectified. It's not. It's like being contrived. You can't avoid being contrived. It's because being contrived means it's just created. Everything is contrived in a story. Just like I said, everything is made up. Everything is directed. The reader's not supposed to think about the fact it's contrived. That willing suspension of disbelief. If you break that, then if they start talking about the fact that something is contrived, you've made a mistake. But if you stop to think about it, everything is contrived. And it's not that you can avoid being contrived. You have to avoid people thinking about the fact that it's contrived. And the same thing is true of objectification. It will happen. And my personal thing is, I have my own personal ideas on what a character represents, or I'm just having. If you start ever hear me talk about what I think part of my story means, I'm talking about for my own benefit, and 9 times out of 10, I come up with such metaphors and idioms after I've already written the story. While I'm writing the story, I'm just writing the story. I'm trying to think of what would this character do? What would that character do? What's going on behind the scenes that the audience can't see? And after the words of the fact, I try to figure out why I came up with those particular situations. Just for my own benefit. But I would like I tend to try to think that we, as the readers and the viewers do most of the objectification. That is not always the case, and I think Hollywood is very blatantly trying to lump everybody into the holes it wants everybody to be in. White, black, Asian, Hispanic, Middle Eastern. Hollywood wants everybody to stay in one place. Hollywood does not like people to move out of their cliche. It plays with their sense of reality, and what they want is to keep us that. I mean, even one of my biggest ones that I harp on is Sky High, which on the outside is a Disney thing about how parents should pay more attention to their kids and how labeling people is bad. But if you actually pay attention to it, and this is one of those cases where you really, really just should enjoy the silliness of it and not think too clearly. If you think about it, they undercut their own message all the time. I'm not going to go into it. I have a long rant about that. I'll probably post later. But yeah, Hollywood does that. But we do it too. We see things the way we want to understand, the way our brain best understands them. If we go into a theater looking for ways that that we are being offended, or our group or our community is being offended by that particular movie, I guarantee you will find a way that the movie is offending you. If you don't go into it thinking about that, you're less likely to have that. And again, sometimes with Hollywood, you don't really have much chance. They are, in a lot of cases, yes, offending, trying to push their own agenda on the world. But, at least my opinion, it just might be me going in with a bias. And I will admit, like I said, I go into Hollywood films with a bias that Hollywood is hypocritical. On that note, by the way, Schindler's List, very good. Very good. I actually really enjoyed Schindler's List. I'm kind of appalled that Spielberg didn't get the Oscar sooner, but that's Hollywood. Anyway, I need to see a couple others, but Schindler's List is very good. But yeah, a lot of the movies I saw being pointed out in this thing about how they were marginalizing this ethnic group as either the dragon lady or the helpless victim that needs to be rescued. A lot of the movies they were harping on for that were action movies. In all honesty, in action movies, the main character is either the female is either the main character or one of the main characters, and one of the central protagonists who's doing the rest the action, in which case she would qualify in a lot of cases under Dragon Lady. Not always, but in a lot of cases. Or the victim who needs to be rescued. Action movies, that's traditionally what you have for women. And for men, traditionally you have the stalwart hero and the villain and the sidekick. There isn't a lot of... There are some really good action films that have more three-dimensional characters than that, but when you get down to the basics, there are those 5 roles. The sidekick, which could be male or female, the hero or heroine, the villain or villainess, either or. I really shouldn't be using the villainess. The hero or the villain, which could be male or female. The comic relief, and then the rescuee, who is going to be weak. Those are and either a mentor or some other such older figure. Those 5 roles, in taking out the mentor because it's not really going to be often in the movie, but the 4 roles of the villain, the hero, the comic relief, and the rescuee are pretty much the main focus for action movies. So they're not really a good model for telling how a particular group is being marginalized or not. Now, what would be a good, interesting argument was the fact that in those great dramas, a lot of the times, you will find that people, they're mostly white people, or you have a role that really could be played by anybody. There's no particular racial connotation to it at all, but it's always played by but they always select a white person for it. That is where you can kind of starting put talking about racial profiling and all that. But and then of course they talked about how the women of the ethnic group were being over sexualized, which all the women, I tend to find that every woman in a Hollywood movie is over sexualized. Again, every woman is either over sexualized or made into the ice woman who's waiting to be thawed. Meanwhile, the men of a particular ethnic group are being desexed, and when they said that, they used as an example somebody who has been first on the list of names that are used by women for whenever the topic of hot guys comes up on Twitter, chat, YouTube, or whatever for years. And it's like completely counter to the point they were trying to make, even though they put up a scene that out of context seems to support the idea that that particular actor was being made into a being underpowered sexually because he was being berated by a white woman for not knowing what Santa Claus was. If you've seen the entire movie, you would know that the woman tends to be getting lectured throughout most of that, as in the woman really gets shown as she doesn't know anything about what's going on with her life, and she has a lot to get things together, and he's actually got his life pretty much together. He's just having a bit of a problem after being betrayed by a coworker. So I've just sort of rambled here, but I'm just kind of saying that it's not white culture that Hollywood is pushing. It's Hollywood culture that Hollywood is pushing. And it's not just the ethnic minorities, if you talk minorities as in just what's minority in America. It is pretty much every social group. Because Hollywood tends to think that the way they see the world is the way the world should be. Or, no, they think the world is flawed, and they show the world the way they think the world is. And there are those type of liberals who think that they're smarter than everybody, and the rest of us don't really have a clue as to how to live our lives, and that people like them need to show us how to live their lives. These are the same people that think, oh, poor Africa. Africa needs to be taught how to take care of itself. Or thinking that, talking about how we need to go and save different countries from there. We should go to X country and remove X leader because he's bad and he's mistreating his people. But at the same time, these are the same people that say we shouldn't interfere. That they want it both ways. This is Hollywood. They're the ones that say we're terrible because we're doing nothing, like, for example, say in the atrocities going on, I guess, Burma and a couple other the South, maybe another Southeast Asian nation, but I think it's just Burma right now. There are these atrocities in Burma, and we should do something about it, but we can't interfere. They want their cake, and they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to have it both ways. And they don't understand that's not possible. And these people want to tell us, and it doesn't. And I'm not talking about any particular social, and these people are not necessarily any one particular ethnic group. This is more of a thinking pattern than any sort of ethnic culture. It's Hollywood culture, like I said, and they think they understand the way the world needs to be, and they want the rest of us to follow their lead, and they're doing everything they can to make us do that. And that's why I get kind of annoyed when some people talk about how Hollywood is advancing white culture. And I don't really understand what the term is anyway. Is white culture the country boys that are off in the Southwest that make living ranching and all that? Is it the New York City type? Is it the upper class, the lower class, the Boston elites? There are so many. There's so much variety in the culture that I know for a fact that my particular subset would not fit in very well with probably what is considered the stereotypical white culture, because we're kind of marginalized as geeks and nerds and all that. People that quote unquote live in the basement and are socially inept and blah 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 blah. But yeah, I just get tired of that. That the implication that my race wants everybody to be like ourselves. I'm not going to say that I have much of any understanding of other cultures. I don't have much understanding of my own culture. I don't fit in with average people around here. But it's just as demeaning to me to be assuming it's a racial thing as it is. There's a racial thing about white people want you to be this way, as it is demeaning for Hollywood to say all Asian women are like this, all Latino women are like this, all black women are like this. Why is it more offensive for them to say that? Or all women are like this? Because once you get to white women, apparently they usually take off the white and they just say all women are like this, and assume that that white women are the base of other women, and that if you have to add Asian women or black women or Latino women or whatever to get the difference, and that basically white people don't have their own culture. We're just the base. We don't have our own unique sense of being, that we don't have our own traditions, that we are some sort of, we're in a void of people that haven't figured out what culture is. That's what it feels like. And then you get away from women, and it's once you get to the white men, it's like, how can any white guy not be offended, white male not be offended by half the archetypes you see on movies? How can any Christian not be offended at some of the ways Christians are portrayed in some films as religiously intolerant and all that? I went to there's a free movie event that happens every Monday, and we went to it, and Christmas was coming up, and they were playing this song that came from South Park, with this guy singing Merry Christmas to, going to say, hey Mr. Hinduist, Merry Christmas, hey Mr. Buddhist, Merry Christmas, hey Mr. Shintoist, Merry Christmas, and basically demeaning all of these other different religions. And I sat there just kind of holding my mouth shut the entire thing, and at the end of it, somebody was talking to me about how funny it was or whatever thing, and I said, I'm sorry, found it kind of offensive. And it's like, why? Because it makes all the other religions look bad? I was like, no, I didn't hear any one Muslim making an ass out of himself. I didn't hear one Shintoist making an ass out of himself. What I heard was a guy claiming to be Christian be acting in the most unchristian way one of the most unchristian ways I can imagine. And it's supposed to be funny. It just hurts. That's the assumption. That I'm white, therefore I am prejudiced. I'm a man, therefore I'm a pervert. I'm Christian, therefore I'm intolerant and hateful. It just really, really hurts. And no one's ever going to say about the way, men are going to be objectified in Hollywood, because the way men are objectified is considered a positive objectification. It is good to be seen as strong, virile, and willing to let your lower body do your thinking for you. That's apparently a good thing. And to state that it's trying to go towards a white culture is just, it's not going towards a white culture. It's because I can almost guarantee you that the vast majority of people don't think about this stuff enough. Most people do not think about politics and culture enough to have any idea of way they want people to act or not act. And that's fine, because most people just focus on going on with their ordinary life. And it's not to say they're stupid because they're not thinking about culture, which is something a lot of the elitists do say, that I don't like thinking about culture a lot of the time. I do it a lot. I do it sometimes because I have to for writing my books. You have to have a firm understanding of culture, history, and a few other things in order to write a good story. But I hate it whenever I hear that society wants us to be more white. And I hate it when people complain about having to give up their customs and their traditions, and as if the Europeans who came over here didn't. I mean, in some cases they didn't. A lot of cases, the Chinese culture hasn't been left behind. The Hispanic culture hasn't been left behind. You get Day of the Dead all over the place. You get a Chinese New Year. You have bagpipes for the Scots and here and there. Again, that's white, but it's as if we're expected to have abandoned our cultural heritage as Europeans in order to be Americans, and that's normal for us because we're white. I get tired of that, and I get tired of the labels. I don't want to hear. There are times I don't want to hear Asian American. I don't want to hear white American. Well, you won't hear white American. You'll hear American and people automatically think white. It's tiring. I'm going to stop because I'm at 33 minutes here. I'm just going to stop.